she had to figure it out with, of course, appropriate support. And, oh, by the way, to really push on this idea, if Chloe forgot her homework, there's no way her mother would bring it to school, because then she'd only forget it once, right? If she forgot her homework and we brought it to school, we'd always be bringing her homework to school. If it was cold out and she forgot to bring a sweater, nobody's bringing a sweater. If she forgot her lunch, nobody's bringing her lunch. We're teaching her probably the most important skill of mentally strong people. I'm responsible for my life. And if there are consequences, I'm going to pay it. And so you want them to make mistakes when the consequences are affordable.
And what age is that at? Is that at a particular age, or is there a time when?
Like 4, 5, 6, earlier the better. And of course, you're always putting, think of bowling alley, you're putting bumper guards up to protect them. But when I was a young parent, I think my self-esteem wasn't great. And I would get self-esteem by solving my children's problems. And what I realized is I was robbing them of their self-esteem. Because where do we get self-esteem? There's this great study out of Harvard where they followed 454 inner city Boston school kids for 70 years. I mean, think about that. I mean, one of the longest longevity studies ever done. And they looked at what was going, with mental illness, with addiction, with self-esteem. And the only thing that correlated with self-esteem was whether or not you worked as a child, whether or not you had responsibility at home, you had a paper route, you had an outside job. When I was 10 years old, I went to work, because my dad owned grocery stores. And work is good. But for people who are affluent, who have help at home, and everything is done for the child, you're really setting the child up for struggles in their life, because they won't develop a sense of agency.
That's so.
Time, like actual physical time, where you're not on your phone, but you put the phone away and you spend 20 minutes a day with a child. So there's an exercise I talk about in the book that I love so much, that, all the things I've recommended to my patients over the last 45 years, when I decided to be a psychiatrist 45 years ago, special time, it's magic. And 20 minutes a day, do something with your child and into their head. Don't do that. Listen to them. And therapists learn this technique called active listening, that whenever someone says something, you don't interrupt and tell them how to think. Now, at the end of a half an hour, he says, I still want to have blue hair. I'm going to tell him, no way in hell, as long as you live in my house, because it's not cool to look weird. I mean, if you look weird, you're going to hang out with weird people, right? It's okay to have boundaries around behavior. Some parents, they have like no boundaries. And I think some boundaries are appropriate.
What does no boundaries lead to? Like from a neuroscience and from a study perspective of what happens if you have no boundaries?
It leads to mental health problems. So there's this great study out of the University of Oregon. We looked at 10,000 families, and they looked at parenting along 2 dimensions. Parents who were firm versus permissive, and then hostile versus loving.